The historic mugshot of former President Donald Trump, which we have all seen over and over and over again the last couple of days, has made headlines around the world. He surrendered to arrest in Fulton County on charges of an illegal scheme to overturn the 2020 election in Georgia. Now, this is the fourth indictment of the former president. So how is the Georgia case different from those other cases? We want to welcome back in Mushtaq Gunja. He is a former federal prosecutor and Georgetown law professor. We thank you for being here. I want to talk about the timeline, because we are now at 4 cases, 2 of them state cases, New York and Georgia, 2 of them federal cases that Jack Smith has brought. What order should we expect these cases to go in? And Jack Smith holds about 50% of these cases right now. Does the federal portion of this get any kind of priority?
Oh, it's such a great question, and sort of a little bit of a difficult one to predict. Jack Smith is in court tomorrow trying to set a timeline for when the January 6th cases are going to go. He's arguing that he's ready to go to trial in January of next year. President Trump wants to go to trial in April of 2026. So, I mean, you know, we have some big sort of space to fill there. You know, I think actually the most ready case to go to trial, both from a factual perspective and a legal perspective, is the Florida case. Because
just to remind folks, that's the story. That's the case that involves the handling of classified documents.
That's right. And the reason that that case is probably the quickest to go, or could be the quickest to go, is that the law is relatively well trodden there. You know, the federal government prosecutes people for handling classified documents improperly every dozens of times a year. The facts are pretty clear in that case, too. I mean, we all saw the photographs of the documents and the boxes in President Trump's bathroom. The facts are clear. The law is relatively clear. So that case could theoretically go pretty quickly. Now, that case is scheduled to go to trial, at least currently scheduled to go to trial in April of next year. That's the one that I have my eye on as going first.
One of the questions about the Georgia case right now is whether or not it will remain in the hands of the state judicial system, or whether this could become a federal case. How does that work as far as who decides that? How is it decided, and where would it go?
Yeah, it's actually quite unusual. Very few cases get what law professors sort of call removed from state court to federal court, but this can happen when a person who has some federal duties is charged in state court. Mark Meadows will be in court tomorrow arguing that his case should be removed from state court to the Northern District Court in Georgia, the federal court there. Because he's arguing that he's being prosecuted for actions that he took under the color of sort of his federal duties.
Well, you know, not being an attorney, my read on that had been, though, that that could only happen if a federal official was acting within their authority as a federal official. Doesn't he have to make the case that he was doing the things that he's indicted for as the White House chief of staff?
He sure does, and that's going to be a little bit of an uphill climb, right? Because you know, it appears to me, at least from the face, that the actions that he took, that the president took in December of 2020 in relation to Georgia, were really acting as in the scope of the campaign, right? I mean, President Trump was acting as a presidential candidate and less as president, and Mark Meadows probably the same. What's really interesting, actually, is that Mark Meadows might have to testify tomorrow. And that's a place that he may not want to do that. President Trump might not want Mark Meadows to testify. But if he wants to have this case removed, his best chance is actually to tell the court, I did these actions because I was acting under federal law.
And a big difference between the federal case that Jack Smith has brought and what they're doing in Georgia is they had unindicted co-conspirators in the federal case. It is not the case so far in large part in the Georgia case.
That's right. There are some unindicted co-conspirators in Georgia, but you know, the big difference is that President Trump is indicted with 18 co-defendants, and that gets incredibly messy because the interests of each of these defendants will start to diverge a little bit. We see this. Mark Meadows is looking to remove his case. We saw that defendants Chesborough and Sidney Powell, they both are asking for a speedy trial. They want their trial to go in the next couple of months. I don't think that's what President Trump wants. So the interests are going to start to diverge. It will get messy.
And with 18 people, they're all tried together, together or separately?
They could be. I mean, so, you know, in a case in which 19 defendants are tried together, most of the time some of them will plead. We'll have to see what happens.
Mushtaq Gunja, Georgetown University, we appreciate you joining us from the Georgetown Law School.